Christina, where does this podcast find you?
I am in my apartment in New York City, down in Battery Park City.
So, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself first before we jump into some of the questions I have for you?
So I'm the VP of product design at Warner Music Group, and I lead the entire UX function. So that's design, content design, research, design systems, and design operations. And so I'm in charge of all of the software and apps for how we run our music business internally, as well as how we share information and experiences with our artists and songwriters, and how we connect also with fans. And then I've been at this game, sort of this digital experience game, for over 25 years now. And I've been leading design teams probably for almost most of it, actually. I fell into leadership early and because of how things moved with the dot-com boom. But I've been fortunate to work at so many different large corporations, things like Etsy, which is where I was before here, but also at Accenture, in the banking industry. So I was at Morgan Stanley as well. I was at Amex. I worked at the Discovery Channel. So I've been around the block. I've been in a lot of different industries too.
As you mentioned, you've worked with and for many of the Fortune 500 and really across a number of interesting industries. So you've actually seen a lot. And then I'm assuming on the Accenture side, also just been consulting even more. And given that we're at such an interesting time in the world, really, not just the business world, but specifically also in the business world, I wanted to ask you, first and foremost, what is your current assessment of where business is at? AI obviously is probably on everyone's mind, but even more so, the transformation that you might actually anticipate or already see, and how it compares to, the prior, at least quarter of a decade that you've seen.
Maybe it's my own personal lens of how I view the world, but everything feels like Groundhog Day, where it's just a new technology or a new experience that everyone is shifting to meet the market or meet customer expectations or meet the expectations of the street, that makes people readjust how they approach business and how they approach how they work. But ultimately, companies still run the same. Some are more innovative than others. Some are very much lagging and behind than others. Some still have great brands and trade on that. But ultimately, there's always this cycle that happens. Granted, the cycles are getting shorter and shorter when those cycles appear, but there's always something new coming up, right? So it's like Web 2.0, it's blockchain, it's AI. It all feels the same, but just a slightly different flavor.
Do you think that, because I also, on the one hand, totally see that as well. Do you think that with AI, we're seeing a bigger transfer? Maybe not short term, because I think you're right. I mean, it feels like everyone is jumping on this the same way they jumped on mobile, the same way they jumped on crypto, the same way.
Yeah.
Maybe more mid to long term.
Mhm.
Do you think that AI is a more transformative shift that goes beyond the technology and more into the social, cultural, and really changing the definition of what a company is, what a business is, how it operates, or not?
I think it's definitely going to have a major impact. I think mobile was a huge impact. And I'm not sure whether or not AI will or will not be bigger than that, because for years, computers in mainframes, computers on a desktop, computers in a laptop, computer in my pocket, right? That's a huge shift of everything that you can do on the go and changes our entire world. One of the things that's been super fascinating for me to observe with AI is not only does it make things happen faster, the experience of what people interact with, actually, they're now okay for things to happen slower. So I don't know if you've observed this, but it used to be that performance was everything, right? We would look and say, oh my gosh, if this page doesn't load in 0.000, we will have 80% drop off, right? And we would map that, and anywhere that you worked, you would care about that so much. Now there's this expectation that if the sparkles are working, that means that they're computing something. And even if they give me back a hallucination, I'm willing to wait. And that to me is a fascinating shift
It's
of
really interesting.
I don't want to do the work, but I'll wait for you to do something. Whereas before I had this expectation of instantaneous.
That's a really interesting observation that I actually, in that way, haven't really heard many people talk about. Certainly haven't thought about it that way.
And so
Yeah,
that in itself is a whole new interaction pattern because think about what you can fake now. If you tell someone you're doing something with AI, but the reality is you might not be, right? Or if you used to use machine learning to power your search and people were really mad that it took long, but now you're like, my search is powered by AI and it takes forever now, right? What's that going to mean to these experiences and to people's expectation? Or if I'm like, oh, I'm used to having like a lot of search results. Granted, I don't want to go through all of them, but there's a comfort there that there's 1,000+ search results. And now it's like, it took me a really long time and here's one. But you don't necessarily know if that one was sponsored, if that one is actually the one. And then you're like, again, is that a hallucination? And do I then give it another prompt and then I wait another, 5 minutes and get another one back? Like that, this is a whole new type of interaction with technology that is going to shift expectations that I don't think we're yet truly aware of how that's going to affect how people think, what people are doing, how people can manipulate that for human experience. I'm waiting to see that unfold, and that in and of itself I think will be really critical.
one of the other things that this makes me think about is I've certainly observed with myself that I often reach what I think you posted about a couple weeks ago, kind of GPT fatigue, where because I have to, I get results very quickly and then I have to reprompt, where if I just took maybe a little bit of time and started thinking about it a little bit more, intensely, I guess, I might actually be able to get better results, maybe quicker.
Yeah.
So that time component is really interesting. And I know we want to talk more about
Yeah.
the brain
Yeah.
in this conversation, but I read an article also just a few weeks ago about how there is a speed limit to our brain and our thoughts, right? And it's really it's such an interesting conversation to think a little bit more deeply about our perception of time, about our perception of effort
Yeah.
and value that we're getting back.
Someone will waste time banging against a generative AI chat experience when you're right. If I took that first output and then spent maybe the next 5 minutes myself, I could be done. With how addictive social media is, I do fear that there's going to be an addiction to generative AI that we also have to experience and learn about that because there's a dopamine hit when you get a return, right? Like it's almost like a gamble. It's like, what's it gonna tell me, right? It's the same
Yes.
thing. And so I think that that's something that we're gonna see emerge in society too.
I think that's one of the most fascinating and also probably one of the most concerning aspects of this technology. There's this book by Dr. Anna Lemke, who actually teaches at Stanford, called Dopamine Nation. It came out
Mhm.
not too long ago. And the fact that this technology, probably more than any other technology that we've deployed so far, I would postulate, can alter our physiology very, very quickly.
Yeah, yeah,
And we've seen that to the extreme with these character AI chatbots and really leading to harm, physical harm.
yeah.
But also, as you just mentioned, even just that addictive pattern
Mhm.
that can be kicked off. So just shifting gears a little bit, because you are an incredibly creative person and have worked in incredibly creative industries too, especially with the Etsy and then now with music. How do you think about AI creativity and where it's going to help us
Mhm.
or actually hinder developing our own inert human creativity and ability to create new solutions?
Yeah. So I think it's really important to understand yourself and what fuels your own creativity and basically break yourself down and know how you work. So the thing about me is I actually do very good in dialogue. So I've never articulated before this addictive nature of generative AI, but one of my major forms of creativity is dialogue. And so I can always get someplace further by having a really good conversation with somebody else. that it's extremely stimulating.
Hmm.
And I can really push my thinking about a topic if I'm talking to someone more so than if I'm sitting by myself. So for me, and that needs to be a verbal conversation, it's not a written conversation. So if I can get a Gen AI voice conversation going, I could probably be much more creative on my own because I know that that is one of the elements that works very well for me in problem solving and creativity. But I think that if people know how to hack their own brain, which is probably a phrase I'm going to use a lot today, that you can uncover how Gen AI can augment you in the ways that are best for you or your team or somebody else, that sort of type thing.
Very interesting. To the point where, have you tried GPT certainly is a multimodal experience. Have you tried the conversational actual voice in and output with GPT?
I haven't yet, and I'm a little afraid of it, to be perfectly honest, which is
Yeah.
why I haven't attempted it.
Yeah.
And part of it is I think I might like it too much.
Hmm.
Like, over earlier in the year, I was reading the stories about people having AI boyfriends and girlfriends.
Yeah.
And I was like, I bet you I would love that. Because a lot of how I interact with my boyfriend is over text. And I was like, it would be so easy to be my AI boyfriend because you just have to text me back. I'm already giving you like the modality that works that you're programmed for. And so I was like, I bet you if I started talking, I would get addicted to it. So I
Yeah.
have purposefully actually avoided it. But now I think now that we're talking about it, I have to try it. Yeah.
I feel the same because I really enjoy and thrive, especially in the one-on-one conversation
Yes.
creatively. And also, I believe that this artifact of a human to human conversation is actually going to be so critical and important in a world where we will end up, I mean, with Notebook LM and all of that, we have so much synthetic stuff already being thrown out in the world, and all these GPT blog posts on LinkedIn and all that stuff. But on the flip side too, yeah, as you were talking about this, I was wondering maybe I should give this a try, because even if it is just as a thought partner, that could be very, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like my team, definitely on the content side, we end up using, generative AI a lot. And oftentimes it's when you're stuck and instead of Googling the thesaurus for whatever words, if you put it in there, it just pushes you one step further.
Hmm.
And even if it gives you back crap, it at least takes your brain and says, did you think about this?
Yes.
And that's a very important aspect of dialogue and creativity, is another stimulus.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is just helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So you already mentioned hacking the brain.
Yes.
I've been burning to ask you a lot of questions. Maybe we start with hacking your own brain. And then I know there's a whole conversation to be had about how do you actually bring this as a leader into an organization in order to really harness the ingenuity and creativity of every single person on your team, which I know you're also very passionate about. So tell me and tell us about hacking your own brain and what that looks like for you and what tips you might have.
Yeah. So I have found that I'm drawn to environments that at first don't have a lot of structure in them. And oftentimes they need me to put structure in them, or places that need me to solve the same problem over and over and over again, but better. So an example of this is this is my funniest job that people are like, you did what? After the dot-com bust, I became a creative director at a law firm, and I had that job for 6.5 years.
Amazing.
And it was actually an extremely formative job for me because every year I had the same set of projects, and it was do these projects over and over again, but better. And it was also one of the places where I learned so many fundamentals of business that I don't think I would have learned anywhere else because I worked for a great mentor, and then from there decided to go to business school, et cetera, et cetera. But so I would have to do things like 3 separate annual reports for the different practice groups every year. Every year we had a big annual partners meeting where everyone would travel to a really nice location. And then I was in charge of helping to design the entire run of show programming. And every practice group wanted to have a interesting video skit, and they wanted it to be better than theirs last year and better than the other teams. But I worked on all of them every year. And so it was like me in concert with their marketing manager. But I'm like, but I'm on all of these all the time. So you know that there's a limiting factor here. But so you have to understand the personality of the people involved and whatnot. But doing, and then it would be like, make the holiday party invitation over again next year. Do this, do that. Just everything was repetitive over and over and over again. And actually that was very similar to when I was at Accenture in management consulting, where it was invent a new business for an existing Fortune 500 company. Keep trying to invent a business. What would stick? What would be their next model that they would go after? And you have to just keep trying and saying, well, what about this? What about that? What about that? But so doing that under pressure time zones, you're like, how do I do this? This seems impossible. And so at an early age, in my early 20s, I had to figure out, well, how can I do this? How can I be reliable and make sure that I can actually fulfill my job? And so that was when I first got this idea of hacking my brain. And one of the first things that I found out was that procrastination is very good for me. Other people hate it, and we could talk about that in a minute. Like when I do it, they hate it. But what I learned is that it actually changed my brain chemistry when I procrastinated, that I would sort of have that creative spark happen because of the pressure and the stress of that time frame. And even if I had given myself tons of time, the idea wouldn't come until 10 o'clock at night or 2 days before or whatever felt like the appropriate time frame, procrastination. And I was like, why does this keep happening to me? And I keep pissing off my coworkers, right?
Certainly been there.
And then I was like, well, this works for me. And so I just had to like own up to the fact that like, I think I actually need this. And there's something physiologically that's happening that is actually working for me. And then I was like, well, how can I induce the feeling of procrastination without actually procrastinating so that I can be a better partner to my business partners, to my coworkers? And then it was like, if somebody's mad at me or there's a time pressure that somebody else is putting on me where there's an actual real time pressure. If I make a deadline for myself, I know it's not real, right? It's like, I'm going to go to bed, right? I know it's not real. But if I enroll somebody else and promise them a date, then it's real. Even if the final isn't due, if I give them an interim date and I'm like, you will see this thing from me by then so that you can then socialize it or whatever, right? Like I would put stakes on it. It would then induce the same kind of pressure because I knew that I was accountable to somebody else. And so then I could time a project where I could bring somebody along on a schedule and deliver and have it be actually on a much more normal person's delivery model.
So the procrastination part, I can very much relate to. I love the way you dove deeper into what's happening and then really leverage that for your own good, but also for really driving creative outputs. What was the next level of that, or even 2-3 levels after that? That would be really interesting.
Yeah. So I learned also that I'm really, like we talked already about the dialogue aspect of creativity, but I also learned that there are other ways that I can also solve problems. Maybe they are less around a particular creative problem, but more general problem solving. And I like to call it actually unconscious processing. And so either it's going into a liminal space, which, an in-between space. And for me, my favorite liminal space is a shower. So I used to think, oh, maybe I need to sleep on this. And I was like, no, it's the shower part. It's not the sleeping part. Because I would like experiment, right? And I was like, oh, the shower aspect means that I'm doing something. My brain is still engaged on something else, but it's processing the problem, but I'm not thinking about the problem. Or funny enough, sometimes watching sort of like trashy, but not super trashy TV. So like cooking competition shows or something like that, where I'm like, this is sugary fluff, where I'm just not learning anything real, or it's not deep intellectual like drama.
Right.
that I can turn my brain off and that I'll unconsciously process. And so those two things were also ways that I could figure out how to solve problems, more complex problems that might be bothering me either in my life or at work. So that became a really important thing that I learned about my brain. And then the other one that I think is probably the one that works for me is basically mashing up thoughts. And this is what we were talking about with Chat GPT, is that if it gives me back something, that stimulus, I can be like, what? Where did that come from? But then my brain will be like, oh, well, maybe it can work like this. And then I will take it to 12 degrees away from that and then bring something actually meaningful back from that. But I learned this process of creativity of how to actually systematically take a random stimulus and use it in order to get something out of it. And that became really important when I did advertising work, when I was really trying to do innovation, things like that.
Two things that this brings up, which is really fascinating as I'm trying to explore what does the future look like and how do we lead in that future. One being, I was interviewed on another podcast about inner work, right? Because part of this is really about going deep into understanding your own self and what your personal specific makeup is so that you can bring out the best in you. But that also often requires a lot of uncomfortable work.
Yes.
And the other part, which is sort of connected, is we are getting better and better in actually measuring, I guess, biosignals. And we'll probably be able to very consciously use certain modalities or methodologies to very specifically alter states that we want to be in. You can pick either one or both, but I would love to get your take on that.
Well, let's see. I definitely think that I try to do that inner work and have tried to do that inner work, and that it was a key unlock to my leadership. So I have spoken about this in a couple of other places, and that I'm someone who has suffered from complex post-traumatic stress disorder for a good portion of my life, from childhood up to probably maybe, let's say 5 years ago, and that I was on a 10 plus year long healing journey because I knew that it was really causing me to be unhappy, and that I was seeing repeated patterns in my life and in my work that I knew that weren't what I wanted to have, right? A lot of it being anxiety. And that I would talk to my therapist and she would say, oh, well, did you look at it this way instead as an alternative narrative? And I would say, no, I
know that well too.
And it's like, because my nervous system was stuck in the trauma that I was in, I only had one worldview, and it was a protective worldview. And I was like, I can do better than this for myself and for the people that I interact with. And trust me, the most painful work I have ever done has been to be on this journey. And I think that it is the most beneficial thing for myself, my career, and anyone who interacts with me now.
Yeah.
And so it's a really hard choice, and it's a really hard thing to keep doing it. Especially, I'm someone who experiments, especially when you're like, oh, I'm going to try this experiment. It doesn't work. It was painful, but it didn't necessarily work, right? Like I'm not fully healed yet. So was that experiment worth it? But seeking out all of those different modalities, it was like, oh, well, maybe this will tell me something about the next one that I should try, the next thing that I should attempt. And it was a really fascinating and important exercise that I needed to do. And granted, I'm not perfectly healed, and I still have 2 therapists, and I still go to therapy once a week and still practice some of the modalities that I picked up. But it has made a dramatic difference in how I live my life and how I approach work. And I think that it gives me the ability to have so much more empathy and caring and multiple perspectives. Whereas previously I really only had one. And it was oftentimes in a traumatic or victim-based adversarial approach to a situation that wasn't always real.
Yeah, that resonates very deeply with me because my personal journey, inner work journey, is also 10 plus years. Also, the most painful work I've ever done. Very, very similar in a lot of ways, has led me to the understanding that I can only, and I think we all can only lead people to the extent that we can lead ourselves, right? And being
Agree.
able to connect with, first and foremost, our own humanity
Yeah. Yeah.
allows us then to connect with others that we lead or interact with in a way that it brings out the best in them, which is probably a good segue into the second part of my first question is, okay, well, how do you now leverage all of this
Yeah. Yeah.
in ways that you build these incredible organizations that you've led? I know you're very, very educated on trauma informed
Mhm.
leadership. How do you do it? And also, how do you see this becoming more of a uh, just the way we have to lead in a world that will require our best thinking, our best creative ideas, no matter the industry that we're in?
Yeah. So I think one, first and foremost, it's exactly what you said, right? I really resonate with all of that. And the one thing that I try to do is to show up as best I can as my authentic self. Because one of the things that I experienced when I was coming up early in my career was a false narrative of you had to conform.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't fully know where that came from, but it was something that felt right at the time, either from societal or my own, reasons. And I think by showing up as a leader who tries to be authentic, including flaws,
Mm-hmm.
that I let the people that I work with see that that is fine. And that that's one of the best gifts that I can give people is that you are okay. No matter who you are okay. And that's the baseline for a lot of what can help people be their best selves at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to share things like simple things like, oh, I took a vacation, I really needed it. And so I want you all to book vacations now, or I try to really admit when I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like that perspective is so helpful to me. Let's explore that. Or to just really share when I'm trying to work and grow on something. But so I would say that's the first thing is that sort of authenticity and to let people know where I'm at and where I'm coming from, just so that they know that it's possible to be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then I try to build and foster leadership that feels like it has autonomy and control.
Mm-hmm.
Where that means that like I'm not pulling all the strings, right?
Right.
Because when you have your own agency, you can do so much more. And then you're actually free to make more choices than when you feel like you're trying to live up to somebody else's ideal. And so where I try to give people enough freedom in order to, like I look at my direct leaders as my team and we make decisions together as opposed to me making decisions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things need to be how we lead the team, need to be how we lead that team.
Right.
I think that means so much more than if I have a thought. Plus, they're closer, right? So they know a lot more of what's happening, what needs to happen than I do. And so I want to acknowledge that they actually have that knowledge over me. And then I try to model good behavior. Like it's amazing to me how many people don't talk about therapy in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to interject real quick, I agree. I made it a conscious choice when I was at SAP running a really large organization to have therapy visible for everyone in my calendar. It was
Yeah.
one of the few things that it was a personal thing. It wasn't saying just personal or what have you. It was in there because for the same reasons, you give people permission
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just what people need to say, I can actually take time for myself, right? Like I can work on myself. And they're like, oh wait, my leader needs therapy, right? Like it changes the whole dynamic. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which is also one of those narratives that I mean is certainly perpetuated with especially what we're currently seeing again with this flare up of, well, that's not masculine and
Yeah.
this and that. Where it's great that there are more men, but also in general more leaders speaking up and saying, no, that is actually okay. And just to put a little pin in this, I know you work with Professor Scott Galloway. And, I think it's one of the best things probably that he is using his platform for in making a point here. And I think it's one of those things that I see more and more leaders leaning into and
Yeah,
saying, no, this is in fact okay. It's important because we also have the science to back up the fact that if we're creating that safe space for people to show up as their authentic selves, they are in fact more creative. They are solving problems better.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really respect what Scott is doing to talk about his own mental health and to really make that a known issue out there, and also tying it to his ability to live a happier life and to have and what success means to him.
Yeah.
I think that's a voice that people really need to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially as, again, this extremely toxic narrative is popping back up.
And I would say the last thing that I try
Yeah.
to do is actually share the things I've learned, right? Like, because I do have lots of brain hacks. And some of them are actually really left of center because in my healing journey I tried mystical topics, and I have found that they rely on a lot of those same brain hacking techniques,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to really delve into your own subconscious as opposed to whether or not you believe the mystical angle or not.
Mm-hmm.
And to talk openly about that, to share it, and to say, hey, sometimes I use these techniques when I get stuck, and I find them to be extremely beneficial. And if you would like to, I'm available to chat with you about them. And so just trying to share and be open.
And especially when it comes to those mystical or even just more traditional methods, they've been around for a long time for a reason, right?
Yes.
And they're part of, I think, the modern world is often that we have become so over rational almost, right? Like
Yeah.
we've developed such a ability to rationalize, and we're scientifically so advanced that often we discount the other parts of the human experience
Yeah.
that are equally as powerful, more subconscious often, right? But that are equally as important for us to harness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it's funny because even I am rationalizing the mystical, so that really resonates with me. Like, my ability to try and make it known to others, I'm like, "You know what? I've been studying the mystical, and this is what I've learned. It's just a way to focus your attention." And then when I explain the ritualistic repetition and, like, pointed attention towards manifestation, and people are like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense to me." And I'm like, "Right? It's so rational, right?"
Well, the nice thing is, the more it seems like we're learning about the brain,
Mhm.
which we don't know much about yet,
No.
really, and the more we learn about the way the universe works, the more a lot of these things are actually becoming demystified in a way that was okay. Well, there's actually something to it, right?
Yeah.
And those worlds blend maybe a bit more. I actually had a really interesting conversation just briefly on the topic with an angel investor who runs like a bigger angel network and who is thinking about instead of doing all of these rational leadership retreats for founders, to do one that is solely focused on mindfulness for a whole number of weeks, saying that he believes that if he teaches founders just mindfulness techniques and meditation,
Mhm.
it will make them better founders and in turn de-risk any future investment. So it's really interesting to see there's more of these kind of conversations and projects happening. And it's one of the reasons I call this thing Poets and Thinkers, because I believe that the future of leadership can learn a lot more from um, those, more emotional parts of the human experience.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. That sounds really exciting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was really, really interesting. So, one thought that I had as I was listening to you, the way you share with your team, I wonder if there's such a concept that exists of, you have regular hackathons, but I wonder if there's such a thing as like brain hackathons that you could do as an organization or with a team to say, hey, here are all sorts of brain hacks. Let's spend a weekend or let's spend a few days of just like figuring out for each individually or even in smaller groups of what works, and just kind of normalizing and leaning into this idea of, hey, this could really help improve the culture.
I think that that's something we should talk about developing because it feels like it actually could be a great companion to AI.
Yeah.
If you know how to hack your brain, you can make AI even more effective for yourself. So we could we could go about it from that angle and how people know so much more about themselves under this guise of productivity, but it'll be a lifelong gem. Yeah.
One of my thesis is that with AI, certainly everything that can be automated will be automated, right? That's not new.
No.
On the flip side, though, it means that humans need to focus and lean on what is most human and is all of those traits like empathy and creativity, and really figure out what makes us the most creative, the most empathetic, the most connected with other humans. So that's a really, I like that idea.
We should definitely make a note of that. I'm looking forward to doing that.
So you also teach, which I'm not sure if you mentioned at the very beginning.
No, I didn't.
So why don't we talk a little bit about teaching
Hmm.
students and preparing them for the world that they're going into, the real world after
Yeah.
school in whatever form that takes. So maybe starting with, what do you teach? Where do you teach?
Hmm.
And then I'll probably have some follow-up questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I teach at NYU in their MBA program, and I teach two classes. One you're going to roll your eyes at, but I teach design thinking for managers.
I'm not rolling my eyes.
And and then which I do take a very managerial bent to. And then the other class I teach is something called Tech Solutions, and it's for the technology-focused MBA program that they have. And it's actually a product management class focused on mid to large companies where
Mm.
it's experiential learning. So there's classroom time and experiential learning where the students actually get real corporate clients.
My class at Princeton is also an experiential class, and I'm a big believer, especially in higher education, where typically it's often not experiential, especially for the world that we're going into. That I
Yes.
think is a format that's going to be critical in
Yeah,
the future.
agreed.
Given, and I love that as a creative leader, you're teaching at the NYU Stern in
Yeah.
the MBA program. I want to talk with you about business leadership, especially the future of business leadership. Now, from your unique perspective, what is it going to look like? There's the skill stack collapsing. There is big changes to business models coming. What do you think are the skills that will remain essential, and what do you think are the skills that will be obsolete? And what's your vision for business leadership going forward?
I think there's actually fundamentals of business that people need to know. So, what are the different ways that companies make money? What are the different ways that companies reach their customer bases? And how do you effectively run a P&L? And how can you basically adjust to change? I think that all of that is really going to be foundational.
Mm.
And then I think a lot of it is around creative problem solving. And as a designer, someone thinks, oh, you want to do a creative problem in a design kind of way. But I think that creative problem solving in any function or format is what's going to be needed, because when you look at something from the other side, you can oftentimes find a better solution that might save you money, that might grow your business, that might actually be a triple win in some way, that if you just didn't take a creative view, you might not have the same kind of gains from it. And then, of course, foundational leadership. I think that human capital is always still going to be an element of this. From the dawn of time, people have worried that machines will take their jobs. It's just that the jobs change. It's a constant moving target,
Mm-hmm.
and that our jobs in a sense become either more relationship based or more in-person craft based, or something that the technology du jour isn't good at. And so it's a matter of, how do you help humans there? In our fields, right, in UX and product design, the thing that worries me the most right now is how we're going to teach those skills. And that could also be to product managers or to engineers who are junior in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of this is actually learned through apprenticeship. And a lot of it we learned actually by banging against the problems,
Yeah.
doing it over and over again, and then getting advice or seeing how someone more senior tackled a similar problem.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the grunt work that helped us learn and grow will be automated. And so how do we help those younger generations go from 0 to 80 when that whole part of the career world might have been automated out? That's, I think, going to be the hard challenge that we face, because we still need people at the 80 to 100 level, but we don't have a pipeline yet for how to get them there when the work that used to get them there is automated.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's it's actually a really important management and educational challenge to solve. In that same direction, pretty much all the management methodologies, techniques that we've applied now for the last 100 plus years, they all are based on the basic, I guess, premise of the Industrial Revolution, which
Yes.
is producing predictable, repeatable, consistent results through humans, right? So make humans work like machines,
Yeah.
because that was the environment that we're in. And this whole principle of high output management and all that kind of stuff. What's the AI everything version of that? Is it high input management? Is it asking the right questions, teaching
Yeah.
you know, people
I
the critical thinking skills to kind of ask the right questions? What do you think?
to hear you speak, prompt engineering sounds like it's making machines think like humans, right? So it might actually be, how do you understand the machine enough to get high output to mimic the human output? But
Interesting.
that that exact opposite might be the the next opportunity.
Yeah, and for the prompt, we even see it with the prompt engineering, although that's all still very nascent and very kind of clunky. But we see it already where that requires a lot of critical thinking and foundational skills, actually,
Yeah.
to understand what it is that you want to get out of the system.
Right. A lot of people casually approach ChatGPT or other models and don't necessarily know what they're looking for. And so you do have to have a bit of prediction of what you're trying to achieve that makes prompt engineering very successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like maybe vision is going to be a really important skill
Yeah.
set, because if you have the vision for the output, you can then get the machine to do the work to produce it. That 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 seems interesting.
So then, and that brings me to my last question. What is the one piece of advice you give your students to get them ready for the future?
Be curious. I think we did generative AI hackathon at work recently, and it was interesting how it felt like people were afraid of some of the tools. And when you gave people the time to actually explore them and see limitations as well as uses, it unlocked for them and removed some of the fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, oh, this isn't going to take my job, but I can
Right.
use it in these ways to make my job better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we tell people to be curious, it's that key that says, don't close yourself off to an opportunity, but actually keep pursuing it, because they're 3 steps away. There could be something really great for you there.
I think it's the best way to end this conversation, which the time flew by, as it
Yeah.
always does when I talk to you. Thank you so much for this conversation.
This has been great, Ben. Thanks so much.
And that's a wrap for this week's show. Thank you for listening to Poets and Thinkers. If you like this episode, make sure you hit follow and subscribe to get the latest episodes wherever you listen to your podcast.